Hi everyone, this is Dr. Mike, host of the free iTunes podcast, Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike, but that's not why I'm here today. This is another Saving Savvy episode, and this time we took the Sony RX10 on holiday. So this is actually a bridge or a hybrid type camera, but it's pretty unique. There is another competitor now, but typically bridge cameras have very small sensors and very long zooms. This particular camera has a much larger sensor than your typical bridge camera. It's a 1-inch sensor, which is about 4 times larger. Its zoom is a 8 times zoom going from 24 to 200 millimeter equivalent. Now that's a lot less than you're going to see in a lot of bridge cameras, but you have to understand that sensor is pretty big, and it's a constant 2.8 f aperture throughout the entire zoom range. So you have a very high quality lens, a much bigger sensor, which makes this a very unique camera. In many ways, it's built like a DSLR. In fact, like a mid-range DSLR. So the body is magnesium, the body is weather sealed. You have not only your back display, which is about 1.2 million dots, but you also have a top display that will give you a lot of useful information. You have an articulating rear screen, which is very bright, and actually you can see it pretty well in sunlight, although I found that I was using the EVF quite a bit. And you have all sorts of manual controls, anything that you would possibly want, and things that you would expect, for instance, on a mid-range DSLR, plus some additional things like a neutral density filter and a virtual horizon, things that you would not necessarily expect on a mid-range DSLR. Controls are fairly simple on the back, but you can easily access things with a function knob, and you have some custom settings. And of course this shoots in RAW, and of course you can shoot this in aperture priority or shutter priority, full manual mode. But you have some extra modes too, like a scene mode and a panorama mode, and some custom modes that you can set up just the way that you want to set them up. Now this camera is known to be an excellent video camera. I did not do any video work on my little holiday, so you're going to see just still films, but it is a great video camera in addition. So, oh, and I also wanted to mention, we now, of course, with Sony's have a standard hot shoe, so you can use, like, if I get that off or not, you can see it's a standard hot shoe, so you can use manual flashes and other sorts of things on that hot shoe, which is their smart hot shoe, which allows you to plug in accessories too, and just handles very, very, very well. So let's take a look at some of the shots that I took and give you an idea of how this camera performs. Alright, well here's just a camping scene, and you can see that it really has great detail and looks very nice indeed. Good dynamic range too in this particular shot. Here's another camping shot, again showing you a lot of dynamic range. This was at an ISO of 125 at an f of 4, shot at 1/200th of a second and wide open. So this is the 24 millimeter equivalent range. Macros actually were quite well, or you get really nice macro shots with some kind of nice bouquet or bokeh in the background. So here are some wildflowers, and here are some other wildflowers too. Again, you see that nice creamy background with some of the flowers being nice and crisp. This was a color shot that was converted into black and white. I just thought it was kind of interesting. Again, the camera was an automatic with an f of 4. ISO of 125 and at 1/320th of a second. Another converted shot with similar values. Again, nicely detailed, looked quite nice, I thought. Here you see me actually making dinner. This is some salmon on a camper stove. Skin tones are nice. Background looks good. Slight blur. This is at an f of 3.5. Again, these smaller sensors can't deliver the same bokeh as an APS-C or a full-frame sensor, but that's just physics. And nice detail here. We're starting a fire, getting ready for a sing-along and some s'mores. And here are those s'mores. Now this is interesting. If you're not in the or from the U.S., s'mores are kind of a tradition that started with the Girl Scouts and has extended to campers. And what they basically consist of is you burn some marshmallows in the campfire, and then you usually use a piece of chocolate and you squash that chocolate and the marshmallows between two graham crackers. This does not have any chocolate because my son, who this s'more was destined to, or it was assigned to, doesn't like chocolate, so he just has marshmallows. Here's a picture of me, and I think it's interesting. Again, good skin tones, good detail. I kind of like the kind of crooked angle that it was taken at. My daughter took this shot, but I kind of like it. And this was at the full 200 millimeters. I was up in a tower, and we were going through some haze, but it still looks pretty sharp and crisp in the background. I think a nice job from this camera. This is an ISO of 125 and an f of 4.5 with a shutter speed of 1/800th of a second out at that full 200 millimeter equivalent range. Now this is interesting. So I am not a wildlife photographer. It's not that I wouldn't like to be one. I just don't have the opportunity. And so this was a bird that I shot at a focal length equivalent of 73 millimeters. So not all the way out. I just kind of pointed the picture or the camera up in the sky and took this shot. When you crop in, however, you can see how amazingly sharp this camera really is. Didn't even know that was a pelican from the distance, but I could see when I kind of cropped in that that's what I was shooting. Here's another similar kind of shot. You see a little bit of lens flare in the top. It's actually kind of attractive. This is a seagull. If I crop into that shot, you can see that it has its lunch in its mouth, and again, a really nice, pretty shot. The focusing on the camera was very quick and very accurate, and I was very pleased by it. Here's just an outdoor shot at an ISO of 125, and again, looks very nice, very much DSLR-like. I would say the overall dynamic range of this camera is DSLR-like, not maybe as good as, let's say, Alpha 77 II, but certainly in the range of, let's say, my old Nikon D3000 that I still use quite a bit. Nice, very nice indeed. Here's another shot that was converted into black and white, and again just shows you the great detail of the lens and sensor combination. Just looks good with a little bouquet in the background on that island in the distance. Here again another just shot, kind of colorful shot, showing how well the camera functions. I think good dynamic range. I kind of punched up the colors a bit on this just because I like colorful pictures, but it looks very fine indeed. An ISO of 125, f of 4, and 1/640th of a second. Here again we got a good shot of dynamic range. This is at an ISO of 320, and you can just see that you have a lot of tonal gradation here, much more like a DSLR, much less like a typical small compact camera, and really gives credit to that little larger sensor and that processor that the camera has, which I guess is the Bionz X. Here again a lot of very bright, beautiful colors from this lighthouse. And here's some indoor shots. This was in a store. This is an ISO of 1600, f2.8, 1/50th of a second. Looks pretty darn good. Here's an ISO of 1250, f2.8. This is inside a church on Washington Island in Wisconsin. Apparently this island, which has a high Scandinavian population, brought in 6 Norwegians to handcraft this church in a traditional manner. And I guess it took them several years to do it. And when they were done, they moved back to Norway, but left this beautiful church. And this is handheld at 1/30th of a second, but really showing the advantages of being able to use that really faster lens of an f2.8, no flash, of course, in the church, and an ISO of 1250, as I said. Here's the Norwegian church from the outside. It's very pretty indeed, very unique. I don't think I've ever seen a church that looked like that before. And just a boat shot, just because we were on a lot of water. We were in Door County, which is a little county that is surrounded by water, and it's a peninsula that kind of sticks out of Wisconsin into Lake Michigan, one of the Great Lakes that are in the Midwest of the U.S. And of course, Canada shares those Great Lakes with us. Here's just a nice boat that would ferry us and did ferry us from the peninsula to Washington Island. And just a barn scene showing just how pretty this camera can take a picture. You really can see the different colors and the sharpness of the lens, and just generally a pretty barn scene. I happen to like barns. This is an indoor flash shot to show you that it does a pretty good job metering flashes. My daughter here is reading a book of jokes, and she's not blown out. Skin tones look pretty good. This was just using the onboard flash, no bouncing or anything like that. And here's a sky shot at an ISO of 125 with an f of 2.8. I don't know, I think I probably just had this accidentally in aperture priority, so we got that shot. But this is handheld at 1/60th of a second. If I used a tripod, I would use a, I think it looks fine. So I think I would have just kept it the way it is. Here's looking at some high ISO shots. So here's my son at an ISO of 3200, f2.8, 1/8 of a second, handheld. Looks pretty good. Of course, you're losing a little bit of dynamic range there, but the fact that he's only being lit by the campfire, not too bad. And this is just a random shot that I wanted to check out the ISO at 6400, f2.8 at 1/20th of a second, handheld, and we're at an equivalent of 73 millimeters focal length. And really not bad at all. I mean, amazingly good performance for a smaller sensor at a pretty high ISO. Finally, here's a shot using the black and white onboard of the camera. This was at an ISO of 6400 again, and this was at f2.8 at a half a second handheld. Now, my daughter has a little blurring because she's moving. My son's pretty still, but that's amazing for me, an old guy, to hold a camera at a half a second and not just have that totally blurry. And you just see the blacks are pretty good without a lot of noise in them. Pretty awesome shot for considering handheld, high ISO, and a half a second exposure time. So let me get out of that screen. And here we are again. So all in all, this is one awesome camera, and I think it's well worth the money, which, by the way, has dropped considerably now that it's being, there's competition with the Panasonic FZ1000. So the price has dropped, and you still might think, well, that's a lot of money for a hybrid or a hybrid camera. But when you think about the fact that you have an f2.8 equivalent lens that goes from 24 to 200 millimeters equivalent, if you were to buy those on a DSLR, you would be spending many more times the price of this camera alone. Add to that the fact that it has pretty good dynamic range for a small sensor camera, I would say almost DSLR-like, and it has excellent high ISO performance for this type of camera. And even for a DSLR, I thought the ISO, high ISO capabilities were absolutely amazing. Plus, you have all these extras, like, for instance, the top LCD and a really excellent viewfinder that I would happily use instead of an optical viewfinder, plus neutral density filters, weather sealing, magnesium body, all these things that really make that an excellent camera. So highly recommended. The only drawback that I could really even complain about is the fact that it is quite heavy. So if you are taking it on a trip, I would say definitely get a different way of holding it, like maybe one of those sling mounts. You don't use the neck strap. You will tire of it quickly. But I would really recommend this camera. I think it's, again, one of those Sony cameras that are so innovative. They just, I don't know how they do it, but they keep coming up with these really great options. So if you get some time, please give my free podcast a listen. It's an audio podcast. You can find it on iTunes. Again, it's called Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike. And please subscribe so I make more of these videos. Have a great day, everyone. And I have, of course, a cup now from Door County. Door County is the place that I travel to in Wisconsin, which is, of course, a state in the United States. Very pretty spot. If you're ever around Wisconsin, give it a look. It's kind of like a little bit of New England in the Midwest. Take care, everyone.